And we're live. You're listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show.
Hosted by Brandon Davenport, aka It's Brandon D.
Well, it's another week in Hedera, HBAR, Hashgraph, all that good stuff. Hello, Hashgraph enthusiasts. It's another great show. Episode 134. It is July 17th, 2024. The usual time you can tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We got a show today. I'm going to talk about a bunch of ecosystem updates. There's a bunch of stuff. There was some news regarding DBS, which is a Hedera Governing Council member that we'll talk about. There was also too, like last week, I was talking about a bunch of breadcrumbs and different things like that. The show was so busy that I didn't have a chance to cover all of it. So we got some leftover breadcrumbs today. Also too, we're going to talk about staking on Hedera. There's a lot of noise about that. Some letters, and also too, the big post that Charles Atkins put out, the president of Hedera. He put out this kind of like big post on X, this manifesto about Hedera. And I want to kind of analyze it a little bit because I've got some thoughts on it. There's been a lot of good conversation about it, but now that we've had almost a week to kind of sit with it, I think it's going to be interesting to take a look at it. But off the top, I wanted to shout out Wonderbar. Thanks for tuning in. I wanted to quickly kind of just touch on something that was really cool that happened. That happened last week and kind of over the weekend. Good morning, Paul. Friday night, I was just on X, and I think this was actually the day that Charles had posted that big blog post. And I read it. I don't know. It felt kind of cathartic. It was like not uplifting, but it was kind of like a response. You know what I mean? From someone in leadership at Hedera. And so I was kind of feeling it, and I shared a post. I don't know. I was just walking, and I just thought, imagine not being an HBARbarian, just because, I think that over the last few weeks and months, with everything happening that we've talked about on the show and just what's been happening in the community, I think that definitely it's easy to feel defeated or burnt out or whatever it might be. And so again, it was energizing to kind of see the conversations around that post from Charles. I was just feeling a bit of a vibe, so I just randomly posted it. But this is kind of an example of like how engaged and powerful the Hedera community is, because as soon as I shared this, like tons of people just started, even Charles himself just started like retweeting it and sharing like, imagine not being an HBARbarian. And I don't know, even this morning I was on X and I was like, I was looking at all the different posts about it. If I search, imagine not being an HBARbarian, I'll just search that. I'm not going to check these search results before I scroll through it, so God help me. But yeah, we've got Ed from Swirlds Labs. We've got all sorts of people. We got Rob Allen. And I don't know. It was just a random post that I did on a Friday night. And shout out to who was it that retweeted it first? I can't remember who it was. I think it was. Let me see here. I have to give credit. for who tweeted it first. Let me see here. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. But anyways, I know Vicente was one of them. And then if there was a few others, but anyways, it was just people retweeted it. And now it's this whole thing where, you know, people are just, you know, retweeting my post or each other's posts and just, I don't know, I guess this is like a massive doxing of the whole community. And it was really cool to see. Like somewhat, Jack from Kabila made like a montage of a bunch of people. You know, we got Zepsi, you know, imagine not being an HBARbarian. So I don't know. I think this was super cool. There's Charles, retweeting it, participating, but I don't know. I think that there's a lot of like crazy stuff that's happened, you know, Coin Man. I mean, lots of people, Vicente, shout out, Vasizi. Some people posting pictures of Lehman. I don't know. It was definitely a vibe and just kind of like very, very surprising for me because, well, I guess maybe not surprising, but like, I would say like, yeah, maybe it was surprising. I don't know. I had a sense that the community was kind of like bummed out about stuff or, you know, burnt out or whatever it might be with everything going on. But again, seeing that, it kind of just speaks to the power of the Hedera community and how engaged everybody is. And still, you know, people are sharing, like, imagine not being an HBARbarian. So I don't know, for what it's worth, it was pretty cool. And I thought that it was definitely a sign that people are online, people are awake. I think that some people think there isn't like a ton of engagement in this space, but clearly there is. So shout out to everybody who is tweeting that. Keep it up. I think it's great. I can't really imagine not being an HBARbarian. And I guess that's kind of the other side of the coin here is like some people were like, well, maybe I can imagine not being an HBARbarian, you know, and looking at maybe the negative side of it. So it's interesting. I think that there's so many different angles to it, but the one thing that you can't argue is like people are, you know, stoked to be HBARbarians in the ecosystem and engaged. And it kind of makes you think like, well, you know, if everyone can get rallied around some random post on a Friday night, imagine what else we can rally around and get excited about. So it just kind of gets you thinking and definitely gets you optimistic. I will say really quick, it's easy to call into the show. And also, if you're watching, give it a share. The more the merrier. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. If you're watching on X, hello. Retweet, post, comment. I can pull your comments up on the screen. If you've got something cool to talk about or share, let me know and let's talk about it. I want to dive into some ecosystem updates, some news, and just a quick observation. I noticed that on the Hedera subreddit, maybe I'll just show you. I was kind of like bummed out. The Hedera subreddit has really been a source of information for me for a long time. I remember I was a member like way early on. And I'll use it for the show. There is a lot of like really great deep dives. One that I'll talk about today, but there's a lot of good stuff, but it's been weird to see the subreddit is literally, if you look at the top posts of the week, literally all of it is like screenshots from X. So, I mean, I think the Hedera subreddit's cool, but we definitely need more OG content in there, to be honest. Something else is going on. So I don't know. The Hedera subreddit's weird. There's 38,000 people in there. So I think that's a thing. Yeah. Retail pays the bills. That's the title of the episode. And that's a big conversation that we're going to touch on today about staking and the fact that, yeah, no matter which way you slice it, retail pays the bills in Hedera, right? The revenue that Hedera generates is generated not by enterprise. But speaking of enterprise, first update today is DBS Bank is leaving the Hedera Governing Council after its 3-year term. And this is a governing council member that they're not controversial, but the reality is DBS has had a 19% attendance rate for governing council meetings, less than 19%. So this wasn't a terribly engaged governing council member. A lot of people complain about the lack of engagement from certain governing council members. So there's two sides to this, right? On one side, you kind of go, well, the governing council's not filled yet. They said they would fill it before the end of the year. And now we're taking a step back, right? We're losing a member. And you can view that in a negative sense. But one thing that I wanted to mention, and this was something that the I believe secretary of the board, the representative Brett McDowell, he mentioned when he came aboard that commonly in organizations like Hedera, when you've got the different articles for the governance, essentially a risk that you run is filling up the seats for governance too quickly. And if you do fill up the 39 governing council members really quickly, you're going to run into a situation where there's no more seats. And that's a bad spot to be in early. So he mentioned that was a risk they want to avoid. And this is part of the conversation around like really attracting higher quality governing council members. They've really made it more difficult to join the governing council. You have to have a use case on Hedera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of these early council members like DBS, there was a lower threshold to get in at the time. And it shows that with that lower threshold, I don't think DBS was like a very high quality governing council member, just judging by their attendance rate for the governing council meetings. They just weren't around a lot, and we haven't seen a lot of news about them. So I think that this is a right choice. And the other way to look at this in a positive way is, and kind of how I see it is, this isn't the first governing council member that has left the governing council. I can't remember the name of the first one that had left, but it was like right at the beginning. I think there was like some kind of blockchain foundation or some kind of organization that dissolved after coming to the governing council. So there was kind of a false start member. So technically DBS isn't the first governing council member to leave, but you could say it is because they completed their first term and everything like that. So I would say this is a major milestone in the positive sense for Hedera with this mechanism of governance, because many networks can easily get in a situation where they have validators or governing members that don't participate, don't contribute a ton of value, but still retain considerable control. And what mechanisms do you have to take back that control, give it to other parties? And I see this as kind of the first signs of the governance structure for Hedera really kind of operating in a really important way. And the operation here is, not so involved governing council member not being on the council, which I think is a benefit. Obviously, it's a bummer because we're trying to fill up the council. But to Brett McDowell's point, it's exciting that we could fill up the governing council by the end of the year. And we've heard a lot from leadership that there's a strong chance of that. My thought is I don't think it's like a massive priority, to be honest. I mean, I tend to agree with Lehman's take on it, which is governing council members now are sufficient to take the risk away from the low number of governing council members. So the amount of governing council members Hedera has, which I believe is like 31 or 32 now, is enough, right? And there is the pipeline, and we know that things are moving, supposedly. But the other thing is there are just more important things that need to happen. So, and again, one of those important things is increasing the quality of the governing council. And I think this is an operation of that. And again, this was done with very little fanfare. This was just a simple post, no blog post, little quick thank you. So clearly not a huge loss for Hedera. So it is what it is. And we're just going to kind of have to see how things roll on. And I'm hoping that we see another governing council member this month. I mean, if we are to fill up the governing council by the end of the year. We got to get one this month. Leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on DBS leaving the council. Is it good? Is it bad? The HBAR Foundation has launched their new RFP program. I think this is really great. I think this is long overdue. Basically, what this means is a change in how the foundation can operate. I really think this is definitely should be the way that all their grants work. So effectively, instead of just accepting grants from people, what this would be is the foundation doing a request for proposal and highlighting the types of things that they're looking for. So that way people and people wanting to get grants can more clearly match it up, right? So what are their initial focuses? Let me see here. Do they say? Okay. Inaugural RFP pilot, credit market development, credit market liquidity. So this is basically a mechanism for the foundation and kind of in line with a lot of other foundations to communicate what the needs are on their end, what they see as needs. So again, people can better just kind of create those proposals, get them in. So it's a positive step, long overdue. It's good to see it happening. I dig it. I agree. I mean, that's another thing is DBS, just going back to that news about them leaving the council. They weren't really engaged. And I mean, it's one thing to say that I don't think that being active on social media is a requirement for a governing council member, but I mean, it's just one thing after another that kind of shows that, some of these governing council members are not very high quality. So it's good to see them, heading out, with all due respect. Another very cool update that I encourage people to check out. We're not going to watch the whole thing here, but DOVU published a demo of their charger protocol. And this essentially is a way for applications to have a token. And we'll use DOVU as an example. They have a DOVU token, and you can utilize DOVU token to pay for API calls in real time. And so basically what this protocol does is it kind of opens up a whole new way for protocols or projects to charge for their services, essentially in a more Web3 way. So if you think about just a random example that might be a little more tangible for some people is like streaming music, right? Well, if you had a bunch of, let's say, streaming music token, and instead of paying monthly for your streaming music plan, it literally just paid it in real time. In a way that was non-custodial, but you could allocate a certain amount, a pre-authorized amount to start pulling from in real time. So all sorts of fascinating stuff that can come from a protocol like this. I'd encourage people to check it out if you're a developer looking for kind of new ways to capture value from your user base and you're doing kind of something like that. Check it out. I think it's really cool. Genfinity also shared a little bit of a scoop here, and this was shared. This is a good question. So, might be my limited knowledge, but why even bother with tokens while we can use fiat for payments? Great question. So, with fiat, you have to rely on standard payment rails. And it comes back to then you have to use a traditional payment gateway, which takes a huge percent, right? So you're instantly losing, 3, 4, 5% off the top right away. And for the customer, it can put in all sorts of different restrictions. And then furthermore, some of these services, you don't want to necessarily give up your name, your address, your credit card information to pay for a service. It would be really cool to be able to pay for a service that doesn't require you to hand over your identity. And that makes sense when we see kind of like so many different security breaches and different things. It just takes a risk away as well from the project or company not having to store that personal information. So it's more about understanding the benefits of it over fiat. And really it comes down to like paying crazy high fees and just different type of risks that come along with it. So if that answers the question. But I want to move on to this. Genfinity shared a little bit of a scoop here. They've discovered what appears to be the central bank of Sweden trialing, or at a minimum trial modeling, both the HBAR and algorithm networks for the future retail CBDC for the e-krona. So there's a whole document here, but Genfinity kind of, can I zoom in here? I guess I can't zoom in on X, but basically down here, you'll see from a page in the document, they're talking about electricity use by network, and they mention usage per kilowatt hour per transaction based on Hedera Hashgraph, and then kilowatt hour per transaction based on the Algorand protocol. So specifically calling out these two protocols. And I mean, people will make all sorts of connections like Algorand's on the DREC Alliance now and all that kind of stuff. So the connections continue to grow. And again, doing their own studies on different networks. So clearly what we're seeing here, and again, Hedera being a part of this conversation, is yes, energy usage at this scale is a very important aspect, an area that these trials and proof of concepts are focused on, especially when we look at like CBDCs and stable coins and like all these different types of things. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just tie this into another, I think this one. Oh, it's down. Oh, here we go. This was actually an article shared July 8th in regards to this as well. And so Genfinity got the actual document. But one thing I wanted to point out here just on this story is someone pointed this out, was they in outlining the different models and networks that could be utilized for the e-krona, is they mention Hedera as semi-centralized and Algorand as decentralized. And there's a few things here where I think that there's might be some outdated messaging. But I mean, this is a contentious topic, right? Where it can be, the argument can be made that Hedera is, semi-centralized or whatever, just because to have like a validator, to have a consensus node, you have to be on the governing council. So again, this further kind of complicates the conversation around like, is Hedera decentralized, but then also what is decentralized, right? Because it all comes down to like how you define it. So very, very interesting stuff. Shout out to Genfinity for finding that. I think that's very, very cool. Also too, some exciting news. SaucerSwap, Sauce token is now live as of the 12th on Gate.io. And we were talking about this, I believe with May from Hashpack a few episodes ago. And she was just talking about like how important it is for not only HBAR to be made accessible on these other centralized exchanges, but also these other HTS tokens like Sauce, like Grelf, like DOVU, like all these other ones. And Gate.io is a major tier 1 exchange. So this stuff is a great sign because, again, these tier 1 exchanges are going to need to put in the work to be able to accept and be compatible with Hedera native tokens. And if that work is done, that means that others can be listed. So really kind of blazing a trail here a little bit, and I love to see it. So shout out to SaucerSwap. Also, they put out a tweet that I think grabbed the attention of quite a few people. This was them saying, commenting on real world assets and how important it is and how Hedera can really differentiate from a network standpoint of how real world assets can be implemented on a DLT. And that's because things are built in like, supply keys, management, pausing keys, KYC. So all these things being baked into the protocol makes it very attractive for real world assets. And on top of that, it's interesting to see a DEX talking about this stuff, because one thing that is brought up often with real world assets, and again, when we talk about real world assets, we're talking about, for example, the diamonds that are tokenized on Hedera, or the Aberdeen or BlackRock money market funds that are tokenized, or the real estate through Toko, or whatever it might be. these real world assets being tokenized on Hedera means they're represented by a token. And seeing a DEX talk about this stuff, what it means is in the future, imagine being able to like, you know, trade parts of a house or a money market fund or whatever for a meme coin or something. It's like these type, like that's a very extreme example. But when you talk about the parity of like just two tokens, I mean, it's totally possible. Like think about carbon offset credits, all these different types of things. It's very, very interesting. So seeing again, these DEXs talk about this. And then when we layer on, you know, borrowing and lending on top of that, it starts to get very exciting. So huge shout out to SaucerSwap. Also too, another update from PixFi, the marketplace aggregator, multi-chain marketplace. You know, we had Tom, the founder of PixFi, on the show a few episodes back. But this is very exciting. So they have their founders token. I minted mine live on the show. And if you go to the PixFi website and you go to mint it, like you saw on the show, like you can buy it with HBAR through Hedera wallet, or you can buy it with Solana. You can buy it with other tokens on other networks. And it would be held inside your PixFi wallet. So now they've added the NFT export function to then, if you hold these NFTs, you can export them to your Hashpack wallet. So this was a key step. Update from them. I think this is really important. So shout out to PixFi. Check it out. Also, I want to call out this HIP 994. This is a little technical, but I just want to put it on people's radar. HIP 994, Native Schema Registry Service. So what this kind of means is when you've got a tokenized object, it contains a little package of code or metadata that kind of is the DNA of that object. And you have to standardize that stuff or else nothing can kind of work together, right? So for those standards, what this HIP is about is giving structured version, schema standards and storing them on chain. What that means is storing them on Hedera either through the file service or HCS or whatever it might be. So it's immutable and it's also interoperable. And this would make them more auditable, more discoverable. And this is a huge need because when we talk about big data or carbon offsets or AI, all these different types of things, this is critical because you have to standardize this stuff or else it just won't work across different systems. And if you don't make these standards accessible and trustworthy, then they're not going to be adopted. So this HIP really kind of goes to address that and talk about what do we do, how do we kind of store and present these standards. So this is pretty cool. Go check it out. I've seen a lot of people sharing it. There's some good discussion around it. I'd say if you're interested in this stuff, go check it out. But it's pretty technical. So if not, don't worry about it. People asking, what's your take on DBS news? You missed it. I just shared my take, but real quick, I think that it's a good thing. I think that, DBS was a low engagement council member, and this is how it's designed to work. If you're not doing a ton of stuff on the council, you shouldn't be on there. So I think that it's, it sucks to lose a member, but I think in the big scheme of things, it's good to see the governance working as intended, and keep making it so there's energized people on the governing council. So, I mean, it's a pretty positive thing. Another update here is the WalletConnect working group for Hedera had a meeting Monday. And this was very, very cool because there's a lot that was talked about. I led the meeting with Tyler at Hgraph. And the whole recording of the meeting and the meeting minutes were posted to the GitHub wiki. So this is all about transparency, right? And the Hedera WalletConnect working group is a group of wallets, including, Hashpack, Blade, Drop, Kabila, dApps, leaders from all the organizations like Swirlds Labs and the foundation and different things. And you can see the people that were in attendance, but this is about doing this open source software development in a transparent way, bringing people together, and then making sure that everyone can kind of see what's going on, because WalletConnect is like so important for the growth of the Hedera ecosystem. If it's not easy for wallets to integrate, then it's going to be very difficult for the ecosystem to grow. So there's a lot of challenges, a lot of different things, but if you're interested in kind of that initiative, go watch the recording for the meeting, check out the notes. It's all there. That's the purpose of it, is to make sure that everyone's on the same page with this important stuff. Quick reminder too, if you're watching, give the show a share. The more the merrier. There's actually quite a few shows. I think there's another show happening right now at the same time, which is great. I think that as the ecosystem grows, the amount of people doing content in it are going to grow as well. So I'd love to see it. Let's talk about some of these leftover breadcrumbs, because last week I talked about a bunch of different things that were happening. And then we had, who do we have call in? Oh yeah, we had Bones call in. That was crazy. Bones was like an OG in the ecosystem. He's coming back. So it was really cool to get like a take from him, but we didn't have a chance. I didn't have a chance to get through a bunch of other different breadcrumbs here. And we are going to move on and talk about staking on Hedera. We're going to talk about the big post from Charles Atkins, do my analysis on it, and a bunch of other things. So stay tuned. But right now, I want to talk about a few different breadcrumbs. And the first one is from FSCO, Fresh Supply Company. This is one that I think is at the top of a lot of people's minds in the ecosystem, just because it's a supply chain use case. The real buzz is about, the fact that they were at one point using MasterCard's Providence product. MasterCard sunsetted that product. So they chose now to migrate to Hedera, and they're bringing the MasterCard integration into Hedera. So theoretically, with this use case going live and the tooling that they bring to the ecosystem, it'll be possible to record, essentially like MasterCard transactions for supply chain settlement to Hedera. So it's very, very exciting. And the question for this use case for a lot of people has been, is this going to be a subsidized use case? Because I know that we've got Atma.io that's doing, 1,500 transactions per second, which is great, but it's subsidized, so it's not generating revenue for the network. But then we see this tweet from David, who's the CEO of FSCO. He says, I'm about to buy all of your HBAR. I need cheap gas. Got plenty of transactions that'll need it. So basically what we're seeing here is the CEO of this use case indicating clearly that they're going to be paying for these transactions. And then the next question is, of course, how many transactions are there going to be? And we'll kind of have to see. But it is very exciting. And I do have to say that having a use case like this with leadership that's this engaged in the community is kind of refreshing. Like this is definitely a enterprise use case, and it's kind of fresh to, see someone in leadership, the CEO of the company, degenning on social media and participating in the Hedera community a little directly. It's very, very cool. So props to David. I've had him on the show a bit. I'd love to have him back. So David, if you're watching, I'd love to have you back on the show. There's also this post that was published on the 15th on Monday. I don't think this was like new stuff. I think this was kind of just like recycled information, but very cool nonetheless. Fresh Supply Co. moves from MasterCard to Hedera for real world asset tokenizations and agri-food. Like this headline right here, we need more of this. These words, right? These buzzwords are great. And basically the article here, the quick summary is, Fresh Supply has transitioned from the now defunct MasterCard Providence private blockchain to the Hedera network. Boom. This move aims to address the traditional opacity in the agri-food value chain by tokenizing assets such as transformation of raw materials to finished products, right? So that's what this use case is all about, is like all these ingredients get combined into new products, all these different types of things. Very, very exciting stuff. And the other thing is, it feels like this is alive, right? There's been a ton of different enterprise use cases. Shout out to HBARbarian here. How you doing? There's been a ton of different use cases like the Coupon Bureau and different things that have kind of like died off a little bit. I mean, we talk about coupons on the show, and whenever there's kind of like an update or change in the project, we talk about it, but not a whole lot going on. So I think that it's great to see, use cases like FSCO that are building on Hedera and that are active. Like we talk, like it comes down to the fact that the CEO is interacting with people in the Hedera ecosystem. It's from an enterprise use case standpoint, maybe not that important, but I do think that it is very interesting. Let's look at some other breadcrumbs here. This was one that was interesting. I already talked about this on the show, but I just wanted to highlight it again, really quick. And actually, I don't know if I talked about this on the show. I think actually, you know what? This was one of those things that I didn't have a chance to get to last episode. So this is very interesting. This was published, I believe, the day after or the day of that Deloitte was, announced that they were launching their use case on Hedera, which we talked about on the last episode. Very exciting stuff. Again, another to be announced or to be put live enterprise use case from Big Four accounting and professional services firm, Deloitte. So big stuff. But when you dive a little deeper, and this is, when I love the Hedera subreddit, when we dive a little deeper, this post, and I encourage people to go check it out, but this post basically just recaps some of the existing connections, some of the existing tentacles that Deloitte has into the Hedera ecosystem already. So Deloitte is obviously, this is the one that we were talking about, their new environmental and social impact program, right? And they call out Hedera specifically in it. So this was kind of the big news. But when we continue, right, we've got Deloitte on the ServiceNow website. ServiceNow, obviously, being a governing council member. Then we've got ServiceNow and the Now platform on the Hedera website, which is, very cool. There's Hitachi and NVIDIA on AI. There's the Dell Native Edge accelerating things. So all of these different little connections and connectors are starting to emerge. And when you expand just a little bit beyond Deloitte and you start going further, like so many different things are starting to pile on. And another one of these things is the DTCC use case that we've already talked about on the show. And this is basically about the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. They're charged with, automating and processing clearing statements of major financial transactions in the United States. They process over $2.5 quadrillion worth of securities every year. And this is a post regarding, securency, which we talked about, open crowd, virtual power exchange, all these different types of things. So again, they mentioned the March episode that I had about the, Q3 monster use case or whatever. So it's posts like this that really kind of get you interested in the enterprise side of things. And I know that we've been told over and over again that, enterprise takes a long time, but we're starting to see not only signs of things going live, we're starting to see actual use cases going live. And also we're starting to see the actual connections forming between different organizations. Because as we know, often these types of enterprises will work together. And to me, that's the most exciting part. And this goes back a long ways away. Like you can even think back of like how often you would see the Microsoft logo on different Hedera use case websites, for example, MTech, right? So many of these massive Fortune 500s, all of the different little connection points and touch points they have with Hedera, those are all increasing. And does it mean that we're going to have some massive watershed moment this year? I don't know, right? I mean, the anonymous source that I spoke with, or that I spoke about on the show, last week, and then also originally in the March episode 118, says that we're going to have a quote unquote monster use case in quarter three. That source also kind of predicted the BlackRock stuff. So all to say is, what's the likelihood of there not being a massive, like, is it, if I were to say I don't think you could say there's no chance that there won't be some kind of massive enterprise use case that goes live this year. I don't think you can say that. I also don't think you can say that it's a sure thing, but we've heard publicly, right? Leadership, folks like Rob Allen on Shark Bites and Lehman and Mance and everybody, and folks at, Eric Puccini at Swirls Labs, like all these different types of things about this next half of the year being important and potentially being very active and big. So it does get you thinking. And for me, it really comes down to what's actually happening on the Hashgraph. And this brings us to our next thing. And again, reminder, if you're watching, share, more the merrier. Leave a comment with your stories. I want to talk about staking, native staking on Hedera. Some thoughts about it. There's been a lot of conversation in the community recently about this. And I think it's something to be revisited. I think it's had the wrong approach. And when we think about possible, like if we look at the problems the ecosystem faces and possible solutions, it feels more and more so like increasing native staking is it's not that it's a silver bullet, but it is a very direct way to address a lot of problems. It does have downsides, but I mean, we'll get to that. So right now, the staking rate on Hedera is around 0.2%, which is very, very low. And this has, I think, raised a lot of concerns and frustration, because if you look at other top proof of stake networks like Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, Avalanche, they have an average, yield of like, 5%, 5.5%. So in comparison, like, again, if you put yourself in the headspace of somebody looking to invest in a network and maybe they're excited about Hedera and they're comparing those networks against each other, you can earn more money passively on these other networks, right? And there's been some frustration around it. And the first post that I saw regarding this was from Jerry Falsetto in the community. Jerry says, with a very cool kind of a vibe and image here. After 5 years of supporting the network, Hedera real native staking rewards are inadequate. I think that's the right word. It's painful to say that out loud. This right here, I just wanted to take a pause here. This right here, I think that Jerry, has summed up a lot of these last few weeks and months for this ecosystem. I think that these last few weeks and months, and Charles does touch on this in his letter that we'll analyze in a minute here, but this sentence here, I think, really resonated for me. I think that a lot of people are experiencing this. I think that right now there's a lot of stuff that's being said out loud that are necessary truths that are definitely painful to say. And this is one of those things, right? Politely asking the governing council to reevaluate. And I'm 100% in agreement with that, right? And then continuing, Brandon, the HBAR bull, makes this post, right? He says, dedicating to staking rewards is such a no-brainer. The issue is HBAR investors have sacrificed against the backdrop of insiders benefiting massively. And I think that cuts to the heart of this. It's not just about staking rewards. It's about the value extracted by insiders. Not funding staking rewards looks like the powers that be would rather save the resources for themselves rather than benefit the HBAR holder. Not saying that that's the intention, but that's the impression that it gives. The top proof of stake networks have higher rewards, right? I've heard reluctance to raising rewards because they know much of it will go to insiders who hold a lot of HBAR. Let's not make a new mistake because of an old one. And I think this captures and dispels of the main concern of raising staking really clearly, right? People will say, well, let's put staking back to the way it was, 6.5%. And people go, well, no, because that means that people who hold the most HBAR will get the most. Isn't that kind of what's already happening? And don't the people that hold a lot of that HBAR, didn't they buy it with their own money? And haven't they assumed a lot of risk over the last 5 years? And so it does make you think, right? And it does weaken that argument of being against increasing native staking rewards because whales will benefit. I think that no matter what we do, baked into the ethos of crypto is whales benefiting. I mean, even going outside of crypto, I mean, who benefits the most? I mean, so I think that it's really about how do people benefit? And the most direct way to do that is native staking. So that was a great point. He continues, I think staking rewards are a bottom-up approach to token distribution that benefits the HBAR economy's builders in the right way, right? Because a lot of these projects hold their treasuries in HBAR. This is a source of income for them. HBAR revenue generating businesses get more HBAR for staking bonuses, blah, blah, blah. Agreed 1,000%. The philosophy of staking rewards being de minimis because it takes little effort to do so once you have the HBAR is false logic. Now, this, I think, is probably the most important point here, and what I think can get lost a lot of times. This right here. If there's one thing that you take away from the conversation about increasing native staking on Hedera, it's this point here, right? And this flies in the face of Lehman's stance on this, right? This whole de minimis thing is Lehman Baird basically saying that it takes no effort to stake your HBAR, so why get a big reward, right? You go into your wallet, you go into your Hashpack, Kabila, Blade Wallet, Drop Wallet, whatever. You choose a node and you hit a button, and you don't actually, right? Remember on Hedera, you don't actually stake your HBAR, right? You just vote with your account saying, I support this node, and you get rewarded for that. And Lehman's stance on it is it takes no effort and there's no risk. Why should it be a high reward? And I think that this right here hits that nail on the head, right? The philosophy of staking rewards being de minimis because it takes little effort to do once you have the HBAR is false logic. It's the effort put into raising the capital to acquire the HBAR that's important. And again, we have to look at the backdrop of what's happening with insiders. We also have to look at the backdrop of the economy. And also we have to look at the fact that retail pays the bills, right? Swirled Labs can't fund themselves. The foundation can't fund themselves. Hedera can't fund themselves unless people are there to buy HBAR. That's how they fund themselves. They sell HBAR. And I think that it's so important to recognize that and understand that it is not enterprise that is paying the bills, right? It is people that invest in HBAR, hold HBAR, build on this network that are the retail people. This is what is keeping the network alive. These are the people that need to be rewarded for that. And so it takes the concept of de minimis outlined by Lehman. And, you know, I think that this is maybe something short-sighted on Lehman's part. Not being able to foresee kind of the environment that Hedera would be in right now. And so it calls that into question. I think it's right to disagree with it. And I think that when you look at the argument against raising staking, it's not very strong. Really the only argument is, well, if we put staking rewards back up, the HBAR is going to go to people that hold the most HBAR. Again, that's already what's happening. And it's not very equitable in the way that it's being done. I think it's a much more straightforward, fair way to raise the staking rewards. And again, there's another level to this, which is, why can't it be changed to begin with? Why isn't staking rewards baked into the protocol, right? Why is this something that can be changed by the governing council? That's also something interesting to think about, which is, you know, on other networks, this isn't really something that can be changed. It just is baked into the protocol. So is it also the question of, like, do we rethink staking overall? So there's so many different things to think about, so many different angles to this, but I agree with the points from Jerry here and Brandon and so many other people in the community that, yes, we need to take another look at staking rewards. And to Big Man down there, you know, I don't think it should be high, but maybe it should not also be this low. And I think that is the consensus here. I think that, you know, you summed it up perfectly. I don't think people really want crazy staking rewards, but we need a better way to stimulate this economy, and staking rewards is one of the most effective ways to do that. So for me, it's creating a loss of faith in Hedera's commitment to the interest of holders. Essentially, I think that's what a lot of people are feeling, and it makes it more difficult to bring new liquidity in. Right? A big appeal that brings new people in is the ability to earn money that in a pretty much risk-free way. And so I think that what a lot of people would like to see, like for me personally, my thought on it is just put it back. Like, why didn't we leave it at 6.5%? I mean, maybe it's unsustainable. Sure. A lot of people can argue that 6.5% is too high, that whales are going to get too much HBAR. But again, that's going to happen anyways, right? We're seeing that happen just currently, right? We see insiders and different things getting, you know, a lot of HBAR. People in leadership at Hedera and all these organizations sell a lot of HBAR. So, and, you know, not just personally, but like to keep the lights on, right? To pay the bills. To do the work that they want to do, that they need to do. It requires that people buy that HBAR. If there's nobody to buy, if nobody's buying HBAR, Hedera ceases to exist. That's just a fact. And so I think that we really have to understand that the governing council isn't generating revenue for Hedera. They're not using the network. And the reason that the bills are paid and the lights are staying on and the work is getting done is because people are buying HBAR. And it's not to say we don't know for a fact that enterprises aren't buying HBAR, right? And we don't know for a fact that enterprises aren't paying for transactions on Hedera. What I'm saying is that clearly what the on-chain data, the on-Hashgraph data shows is that unsubsidized revenue is generated by retail, not enterprise. So in that sense, the incentives are just completely unaligned, and we have to make it more attractive for people to come in here and get HBAR. And that's a great point too. You know, if the price keeps dumping, whales will get more anyway. So again, I think that it just, you know, again, I think that there are very smart people that know the long-term trajectory of Hedera and are very bullish on it. But I mean, again, it goes back to the security of the network. A low price of HBAR makes the network less secure. So there's so many different, ways to look at this. Big Man says, I'm more interested in who's selling. Well, I mean, the people who sell the most HBAR are the people who need to fund operations, right? It's Hedera, it's Swirls, it's the HBAR Foundation, it's these folks that, and again, nothing wrong with it. They have to do this work. They have to pay their employees. They have to do these things. So that's how a network functions. There's no arguing that that's not going to happen. It has to happen. The issue here, though, is that there's a lack of recognition that the reason that can happen is because of retail, right? And so it's that mismatch, right? Enterprise network that focuses on enterprise and very often has kind of shut down retail that depends on retail. And we're seeing a lot of positive change, right? We're seeing a lot of different change. We talked about the foundation's RFP thing. We talked about all these new changes, Charles' letter, etc. But it does feel like it's moving much too slow. And there isn't that alignment. So as you can see, like, it's a very complex topic. That's why I agree with the HBAR bull so much, is it's this nebulous, complex, tangled topic, but focusing on raising staking rewards, although it might not be the best long-term solution, it's clarity. It's simple. It's a simple solution, right? And the argument against it is not super strong, right? I think that there's no way that we can avoid whales becoming bigger, or those that have a lot of HBAR getting even more, right? We can't prevent that. But because also too, a lot of those people bought it, right? So they're assuming risk. A lot of those people that are whales are probably not in the green, right? They're probably bag holding. And so it would be a shame if they start selling, right? If you have retail whales selling, right? It makes it even more difficult for Hedera to sell, for Swirls to sell, to keep their operations going. So there's all different ways we can go about it. I just think that I agree with Brandon. Staking rewards, raising the staking rewards is definitely a way to not only align those incentives better, it's also like you can look at it as a marketing expense, right? I mean, if you want to market this network to other people, like, having a high yield is fantastic. So I don't know. I don't think it's the time to weigh pros and cons. I really think it's the time for action. And I think that this is a really great action to take. So I have to agree. And I mean, behind the scenes, I hope that there's conversations happening. I know that the community's putting pressure on stuff. I'm just kind of talking about what's on social media right here and what people are talking about, and just kind of summarizing the info. And I think that the consensus from the community is, yeah, this is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, whatever it might be. But the one thing we do know is here's a simple solution that's straightforward and could have a really powerful effect on the network, right? Big Man also says, I agree it has to happen. I just feel bummed that there is really not a lot of transparency. Like, are they selling to fund operations or to fund pockets? Who knows? Right? That's the problem, right? Is that we don't. And again, that's, for me personally, it's like, are they lining their pockets? Are they running operations? I mean, it is what it is, right? These organizations were given HBAR by the governing council, and there's a lot of good stuff that's happened. So I don't think it's like this horrible thing. What I do think, though, is that when you place too much pressure on the group of people you depend on to stay alive as a group of organizations, you create a toxic situation, which we're seeing now. If the staking rewards were higher, if the price of HBAR was higher, if there was less sell pressure, this whole situation would be so much different. That's the other thing to take into account, right? It's a real struggle for Hedera and these organizations to do the work they need to do when the community is like really railing against stuff and sharing like very legitimate criticisms and placing a lot of pressure. It makes their job harder. So there's so many different sides to it. And again, so many different sides, so much complexity. Where's the simplicity, right? Where's the action? And a lot of people think that it's in raising staking rewards. And so for me, playing a little part in this, my idea, and maybe it's a little goofy, I don't know, but a little trend that started that I think is really cool is what I said is, well, what about a reminder? What about 1 million immutable reminders? Account 0.0.800, that is the account that stores the staking rewards. So how Hedera works is the percentage of staking rewards that goes out is based on the amount of HBAR inside account 0.0.800. The more HBAR that is in this account, the more staking rewards that get sent to people, the percent goes up. There hasn't been HBAR added recently by any of the organizations or Hedera to account 0.0.800. So my thinking behind this is, imagine if we sent thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of transactions to account 0.0.800 with the memo, retail pays the bills. For me, I think that posting on social media and talking and stuff is really important, but as we've been told by Lehman Baird and Hedera and everything, the truth lies on the Hashgraph. It lies on this network. It's immutable. And I'm seeing tons of people sharing, we've got, hundreds of transactions now to account 800 with this memo. And when we talk about moving the needle, getting attention, putting some pressure on, that can happen on the Hashgraph. And if it's on the Hashgraph, that means you can look back at it in the future. And so I think part of this as well is not just about dealing with the issues now, but it's about making sure they don't happen in the future. And I think that in my mind, and again, maybe this is dumb, but I think in my mind is if we look 10, 20, 50 years into the future and we start to have these same problems with the Hedera network with a misalignment of incentives, somebody can go back and go, look at the transaction history on the staking account from July 2024. Look at this nightmare, right? Let's not have this happen again because it happened and we can just see it right here. This is not good. So let's have something to point to in the future to remind ourselves in the network and leadership to not get ourselves in this position again, because tweets disappear, blog posts disappear, conversations get forgotten. But if it's on the Hashgraph, it's forever. So I think that if you repeat something over and over and over and over and over again, millions of times on a Hashgraph, I mean, it says something. You think about slicing a tree and looking at the rings, and then you have some of those like crazy rings that are a weird color. It's like immediately your brain goes like, what happened? So that's kind of how I see it. Maybe it's dumb, but it is what it is. But retail pays the bills. That's a fact. You can't dispute it. No one can tell me, no one can tell anybody that retail doesn't pay the bills. And by bills, I'm referring to Hedera and related organizations being able to function and being able to pay their employees and all that kind of stuff. If nobody's buying HBAR, it all shuts down. So that's the important thing, is really keeping in mind what is at stake and what's important. And recognizing that the retail community is more powerful than it thinks. And I think that what this is also about is like also just taking a breather here and stepping back and going like, when you look at the big vision of stuff, I think we're all on the same page. I think we all want the same thing, right? It's just about enacting it and taking action. So another example of this is, I'm just going to touch on this quickly because it's better to just dive in and read it. But the HBAR Foundry, a community initiative, a community group, in the ecosystem has published an open letter to the Hedera Council. This is a very comprehensive letter that details a lot of different things. And I think that this kind of stuff is something we'll probably see more of. And there's ways to, add your support to this and all these different types of things. So shout out to the HBAR Foundry for summarizing a lot of what has been talked about in the community for the last weeks, months, years even, and presenting that to the governing council. This is the community having a voice, right? And also, I think that credit where credit's due. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I should say an observation I'm making that's very positive is I haven't seen the community sending formal petitions and letters to leadership or the governing council. And that's happening now. And that tells me a few things, right? And the main thing that it tells me is that the governing council and leadership is receptive. People wouldn't go and put in all this work and research and organize these groups to do these things if there wasn't a high chance of it being received and read and responded to and enacted. So for me, I think that we should all look at stuff like this when we see it, and these attempts to break through and form lines of communication and get points across to leadership in the network. I think we should all look at it as very positive. And it's not so much about what it's about. It's more so that it's happening. And I mean, a lot of people can say, well, we've tried this in the past and people are kind of burnt out. And it's like, what's going to change this time around? And I don't know. I think that what's different this time around is that we're hearing back, right? We're not just as a community asking stuff for the network, calling out issues, highlighting problems and opportunities. We're actually hearing back. And that brings us to the last thing for today, which is what I dub the manifesto. The big article post from Charles, the president of Hedera. This to me shows that over the last year, right? Because people forget, just a quick refresh. Last summer, the governing council started a committee to search for a new president for Hedera. Brett McDowell on the Hedera board served as both the secretary and president. They had to split those roles amongst two people. So Charles became the president of the organization. And president and secretary are two standard roles in any organization. I'm the president of a Canadian corporation, but it's a tiny business. It's like standard stuff. But being a president of Hedera is completely different. And so one of the things that I was most excited about last year was that committee that the governing council set forth to find a president for Hedera. I went to myself, I thought this is the first sign of really deep self-awareness from the governing council that they don't have all the answers and that they need somebody else to come in at the highest level to shake it up. And so this letter that was published, again, by the president of Hedera, I think marks not only the end of an era, but the beginning of a new one. And I want to do a little bit of analysis on the letter because I think that this is probably one of the most important documents we'll have looking back in the history of Hedera. I think that what this letter serves maybe for an analogy is when a rocket goes up to space and then you see that first section of the rocket and it breaks off and it falls back down to Earth. And then that second stage of the rocket ignites and brings it further out into space. I think this letter is kind of the separation of that first stage of the rocket, it feels like to me, because this feels very different. And I want to do a bit of analysis of this letter. And the first thing that I want to kind of analyze I responded with I redid the Lehman video with Charles just because I thought, it's time. Like, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the reality real quick. Lehman's at Swirlds Labs. He's on his computer. He's doing hard math. Lehman's doing what we want him to be doing. Lehman's being left alone and he's doing math. That's what created Hashgraph. And, that's what is going to create the next best stuff. I mean, that's what created the DRAC. So Lehman doing math is great. And so I don't see, in this new era, I don't see Lehman as being like the spokesperson for Hedera, to be honest. I mean, we have NFT projects that reference Lehman, and there's Lehman's face everywhere, and he's emojis on Discord servers everywhere. And I do think that that is going to stay around, but I think that there's a difference between the founder of a network and the face of a network. And the reality is that Lehman's not like a Web3 crypto guy. Like, sure, he knows cryptography and he knows artificial intelligence and he's a genius. He's like a computer science mathematician, super smart guy that invented this thing that makes all this possible. So, but when we talk about the face of an organization, what we're talking about is someone that interfaces with the market. The market is pretty crazy, right? The crypto industry is kind of wild. And we have to have someone that both understands the enterprise side, right? Charles worked at the Federal Reserve and all sorts of different enterprises, but also understands the marketing side and understands the crypto side, right? Charles has worked at major networks and done marketing at like Nike and Disney and stuff. So it's like, Charles is somebody that I think can be the face of the network. And I've held off on saying that a little bit, but I do think so. And I mean, that's why I kind of swapped out Lehman. It's like no disrespect to Lehman at all, but I think it's time to move on. I think it's time to really kind of look at who is interfacing and communicating with the people keeping this thing alive, right? We're not just talking about, look at Charles coming down, saying hi to the kids, playing with all the little doodads here. No, it's like, Charles is speaking to the people keeping his organization alive, right? Retail pays the bills. And so this article here, I want to do an analysis on it. So my first bit of analysis is, I think something that a lot of people haven't picked up on, which is the most important thing. And this comes from a marketer's perspective. The most important thing about this letter that Charles published isn't what's said in the letter, but it's how it was published, right? This could have very easily been a blog post on the Hedera website. It could have easily been like a press release, PR newswire, whatever. It could have been some kind of scripted interview with some media partner, bullshit, show or whatever that is paid to talk nicely about Hedera. It could have easily been any of those things. It could have been a Zoom webinar, some kind of fake Q&A. It could have been any of those things, but it wasn't. It also could have been an article published by Hedera, by the governing council, but it wasn't. What it was a post made by a guy. And to me, it's more important about how this article was published than what's in it, because it's about reading in between the lines. And that's what I read into this. And I go, this is very fresh. And this is a very new approach for Hedera that is in line with the industry. Successful networks, if you kind of A/B Hedera against, let's take Solana, right? When Solana has a kind of to the heart community update, it'll be published by an individual or a person in like some kind of thread. When Hedera has something like that, it's always, again, some kind of like BS news article or PR newswire thing or blog post or some kind of like other like weird boomer thing. But this right here is the first time that I've seen Hedera at this level play the game. And that's what it's about, is it's about person to person, building connection. And it's written in a way that isn't like, it doesn't read like some kind of weird amalgamated, edited thing. It's like, of course it's been edited and reviewed by legal and stuff, but it reads like a human being wrote it, right? And it has, we've seen the post by Charles, we've seen him talk. It sounds like him. And so that's my first observation as I analyze this, is like, I don't want people to miss that about this, is it's not just about what's said. It's about the way that it's published and the way that it's said. That's the most important thing. Now, I want to talk about a few points in the article and kind of talk about them. So the first is, and I'm just going to what I've done is I've taken bits of it and I've got some quotes, and what I want to do is I want to just kind of comment on some of these key sections. So the first is, Charles writes, "The challenges we face as a decentralized ecosystem are significant, but I view this as a real opportunity for a reset of Hedera's thinking, way of working, and way of being seen by the industry." So that's a big thing. Yeah, Shady HBARbarian, like and retweet. Let's get some more folks in here. But that's the first thing. And you know, what that tells me is that it's pretty clear, wrapping this whole thing, is they want to move into a new era, or at least Charles does. The next thing that he kind of has in this piece is the feedback from the community has truly informed and shaped a lot of the new ideas and structures we are currently working to create and implement. So again, what that tells me is that the community has more power than it thinks. I mean, I've said this a few times before, but that kind of lays it out for me, right? That kind of lays it out, and I'll just share kind of the quotes on my screen here. But right, that's the key thing here. The feedback from the community has truly informed and shaped a lot of new ideas. And that's a very that's not a super strong way of putting it, but that's basically saying like the community has, you know, some power. He goes on again and he says, "We acknowledge that recent events and systemic inefficiencies caused by legacy structures have led to concerns about transparency, accountability, and the strategic direction and competitiveness of the Hedera ecosystem." And right there, that's the heart of it. Can Hedera be competitive? Rob Allen mentions this. Hedera needs to be fit for purpose. So that's what it's about. Can Hedera be competitive? Charles continues, and again, these are just snippets from his article that I think are most important. "I've received a ton of valuable feedback from our community, highlighting several areas where we need to improve, some of which I also identified early on in my tenure here." So again, what this tells me, again, reading between the lines, is Charles is the right man for the job because he's like-minded with the community, right? What that says to me is, okay, sorry if that was loud. I usually mute my mic before I open it. Cheers. What that tells me is that out the box, Charles is much more aligned with the retail ecosystem and community. And also too, like, it reminds me of Rob Allen, right? Rob Allen, a governing council member, is, you know, at Australian Payments Plus. He's been at the foundation. He's been at the association. He's been around the block, but he started out in like a Telegram group buying HBAR. So there are these people, like, again, I know that I rail on this show all the time about like, oh, they're disconnected and they're enterprise or whatever. But like, it has to be said that like there are a lot of people at the top in leadership at the governing council that are clued in, that are incredible, that get it, that use the products on the network, that use Hashpack and SaucerSwap and Blade and Kabila and, Bonzo Finance and like all these things. They're in there. They're trying stuff out. There are those people, but there's not enough. And the leader at the top sets the culture for the organization. And knowing now that we have somebody on the level at the top to set a new culture, that makes me super bullish. Continuing on here, and again, these are just snippets. While many in the Hedera community understand what decentralization means, sometimes we hear requests for Hedera to do something that Hedera itself cannot do, and instead is only within the control of a different organization and its board. So this, I think, was one of the most important things that Charles mentioned, which was a reminder, I think, to a lot of people, which is we're saying like, Hedera, you got to do this. You got to stop this. You got to stop this from happening. You got to fix this. And what Charles is saying is like, we literally can't, right? A lot of these initiatives and organizations have been spun out of Hedera. We have no control over them by design. That's decentralization, for better or for worse. So you want decentralization, you got it. And again, arguments can be made all through there, but that's kind of what Charles is saying, is like, he's making it clear to the Hedera ecosystem that there are literally just things that Hedera cannot do, that it does not have control over, which I think is super important for us to understand. He continues, Hedera plans to take steps to work more closely with ecosystem partners to deliver greater transparency and accountability within the ecosystem more broadly. There wasn't a lot, like one topic that's talked about a lot in this community is like, we need more say, we need a seat on the council or whatever, all these types of things. And so I wish that this post from Charles could go a little more into maybe some tangible examples or ideas about how that could be done. It didn't, so that was a little disappointing, but the intention's clear. So that's good enough for me for now, but it would be good to kind of get a better idea of like, okay, what are those steps? What are those tools? What are those systems? But continuing on, this I think was something that jumped out at me hugely. This jumped out at me massively. While Hedera does not and cannot control independent organizations within the ecosystem, we have every right to express when we do not agree with particular decisions or behaviors, and we may speak up in the future. So that, to me, I read that and I was like, because it says a few things. What it's saying is, right, as he outlined previous, is like, hey, we can't control some stuff. We can't make some things happen. But he's making it clear that they have every right to speak up and express when they don't agree with stuff. So what does that mean? What does that look like in practice? I don't know. What he's describing is Hedera sharing criticism against actors in the ecosystem or entities or projects or organizations in the ecosystem. That's, I guess, what he's referring to. Beyond that, I don't really know. I don't want to speculate, but it's essentially the president of the organization saying, listen, we have the ability to do these things and we may speak up more in the future. Again, reading in between the lines says to me that his original draft was probably different than that, and legal was probably like, hey, we need to lighten the language on this. And so this is what we get. But clearly there is a indication here that Hedera, we haven't really seen them do this before, but we may see a Hedera that disagrees publicly with certain things. And we haven't really seen that before. Hedera has really been in a phase of like support, be super conservative with what they say, nothing, never talk negatively about stuff happening in the ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it would be a very, I wouldn't say shocking, but a very stark change for Hedera to voice dissent or objection or criticism in the ecosystem against something. So that to me was very interesting. He continues on. We are currently in the process of exploring ways in which interested companies and possibly individuals who do not meet governing council requirements can participate in some of our newly formed working groups and innovation summits. Right? This initiative, which has been in the works for a couple of months. So again, you start to think like, okay, stuff's been happening. It's being led by our membership committee co-chairs, aims to allow more opportunities for community participation and feedback. They hope to have it finalized and announced soon. So no timeline provided, but clearly, again, the community being heard. So again, I think a very important thing that I would love to have more tangible, more kind of actionable information, but it is what it is. This was, I think, for me, my favorite part of the letter. And again, talking about reading in between the lines, I think what this kind of section I pulled from the letter does is it speaks to the character of Charles. And quite frankly, I haven't seen this kind of vibe from people in leadership often, not just in Hedera, but in general. He says, there are some matters that I told the community on X or Twitter that I would look into, and then found those issues to be more nuanced and complex than I initially assumed, which left you all hanging for answers. And for that, I take responsibility and apologize. So again, a little disappointing for sure, but like when we look at the character of these organizations, when we look at the question of what type of culture is Charles going to create in Hedera going forward, there is definitely a culture of accountability, and that starts with Charles himself holding himself accountable. And I think this is him holding himself accountable, because I do think that was a big disappointment for the community of having Charles say, I want to fix this, that, and this, and just not doing it, and just being honest and saying, although my intentions of providing timely information were sincere, my ability to do so in a multi-layered and decentralized ecosystem is thus far proved untenable. So honesty, accountability, if we want to see that in the ecosystem, it's got to start with the guy at the top. I was a little surprised that this was included. I think that traditionally this can be viewed as weak. I think that traditionally in the enterprise world, this type of stuff can appear to be a chink in the armor or weak, right? But in the Web3 world, in the decentralized world, in the crypto world, and in the eyes and ears of people keeping this thing alive, retail, I think that this is the exact opposite of weakness. This is a strength. I think that holding yourself accountable, being transparent, admitting to mistakes is important. So yeah, sure. It's definitely disappointing and a misstep on Charles' part, but this could have easily just not been included. But I do want to just very much highlight this as a testament to his character. And I think the culture that will be cultivated in Hedera going forward, a culture of self-accountability. He continues on. We are also further strengthening Hedera's market integrity policy, and to help enforce the policy. I saw the enforce word and I was like, oh, okay. Recently signed an agreement with a compliance and market integrity provider that will alert us to suspicious activity within employee wallets. So this kind of like, I was reading this and I was like, whoa, because I know that there's been a lot of speculation about selling patterns of employees at folks in the ecosystem, or whatever it is. I know, I don't want to mention anything specifically. It's just for years, there's been constant stuff like that. And we've always relied on trust in leadership at Hedera. And I think that what this is saying is like, we can't really rely on that. We have to rely on professionals, third parties, to enforce this at the organizational level. And to me, I was kind of surprised. Again, there was a lot of surprising things in this article, but this was one of the major ones, which was, specifically mentioning employee wallets. There's a couple things in here that I'm pretty shocked by in a good way. Continuing on, he says, going forward, our marketing efforts will also showcase high visibility and updated content that will resonate with Web3 developers, users, enthusiasts. He talked about marketing in the letter. To be honest, it was a bit underwhelming for me. I mean, if we were to poll the Hedera community and say, like, what's the weakest link in the Hedera ecosystem? What is the biggest weakness of Hedera? And everyone would say, like, marketing. So I was surprised in not a good way about how little of the letter talked about marketing, but I can understand that from a organizational standpoint, it does feel like there's more important things happening. And I do think that there are a lot of things happening that are very important that we just don't know about. So that's the sense I get. But I mean, would have liked to, see more about marketing. This, I think, again, was very important to know. I will be starting a president's blog, hell yeah, that is regularly updated to talk openly, and then in brackets, within guidelines to protect market integrity and confidentiality. Again, this is a big sticking point. I do think that the Hedera legal is too big at Hedera. I do think that as an organization, like policy and legal stuff, it's too early for like that much of it. I do think it's a lot of red tape. So I don't know why there hasn't been anything like this before. I do think this is a big push probably. So a president's blog would be great, just to know what's going on. Where are the meeting minutes? Last episode I was whining about meeting minutes not being published. Let's actually see if they're published yet. Let's take a look. Hedera meeting minutes. Let's take a look. Transparent governance. Nope. So again, we don't have minutes, but I'll take a blog. The blog will be about what he's working on, what Hedera is working on, and the changes in progress. This would be awesome. Please, for God's sake, please do something. This would be great. On top of that, I'm also going to begin hosting a regular cadence of X Spaces and LinkedIn Lives to invite builders and community members to participate in. Oh my God, breath of fresh air. If this doesn't happen, I'm going to lose my mind. But this seems really great. President's blog and spaces, all these types of things. This is Hedera doing the basics finally. What every other network is doing. This is so good. This right here, we need this desperately. And then in my mind, I went but is this going to happen? When is it going to happen? I was kind of yeah, sure, dude. But it's specifically stated here that schedule is being worked on now, and I should be releasing that within the next 3 weeks. So before the end of the month, this month, we should have, or to be fair, maybe till the first week of August. But anyways, in the next, 15, 20 some odd days, we should have this. So let's hold Charles to it. This would be fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So please, let's start communicating more. Let's start building the transparency. I love this. But wrapping up my analysis on this is what I think is if there was a single sentence, let me try to frame this at how important this part is. There's a part of this article that's so important. I'll tell you how important it is once I get all my brain cells working. One sec. Okay. If this article that Charles published was one sentence, and it was this sentence I'm about to read, I'd still be happy with it. That's how important this sentence is. And this is what he says. He says, I'm grateful for the messages I've received conveying your trust, as well as the ones that were painful to receive, as they have lit some fires in the areas that needed to be lit. Let me read that again. I'm grateful for the messages I've received in conveying your trust, as well as the ones that were painful to receive, as they have lit some fires in the areas that needed to be lit. For me, that I think really summed it up for me. And again, let's read in between the lines here. What Charles is saying is that there are definitely fires that have been lit, and we know that not all this is like peaceful, everyone kind of coming together and solving problems. There's definitely a lot of like unnecessary noise and freakouts and negativity and all sorts of stuff. But kind of to what Charles is talking about is some of the signal here, he's saying is needed to be done. And this is why I kind of am so bullish on this community is I think that what he's referring to is some of this work could not be accomplished by Hedera or anybody else than this community. Charles wouldn't be able to do his job, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying that there were fires that needed to be lit. There were things that needed to be exposed, and it was painful, but he couldn't do that. Nobody could do that except the Hedera community. And so I think that it's a call for us to take a pause for a minute and kind of go, we're on to something here. We really are. I think I've said this a long time that the most underutilized resource in the whole crypto industry is the Hedera community. And this is the leader of this organization, of this network, saying, you're doing important work that I can't do. And so I think that a lot of the different arguing and noise and negativity and stuff, I think we could, definitely do without it. But I think that the stuff that's happening, we talk about the letter being sent to the governing council. We talk about, Brandon E. HBAR Bull's thoughts on staking, the community coming together, analysis being done, detective work being done, conversations happening, people doing the shows, communicating the information, people building, all this kind of stuff, right? It's not just retail pays the bills, but Hedera is a retail network. I think that's what we're all realizing is, it doesn't matter how many times Hedera or anybody says that this is an enterprise network. It's not. It doesn't matter how many Fortune 500 logos are on the governing council or how many enterprise people are on the meeting minutes. It doesn't matter. Hedera is a retail network. And it's a retail network because it is, right? Until it's not. And it's a retail network because, again, retail pays the bills. It's how Hedera stays alive. It's why do people come to the Hedera ecosystem? It's not generally because of the enterprise stuff. It's because of retail applications. It's because of the people. It's because of the community. That's what we hear. That's the truth. And so that's why that sentence was so important to me. And I guess, really wrapping it up on this is, I think sure, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that I think we're going to continue unpacking in this letter from Charles. But again, it's about how it was published. It's about seeing Charles kind of step in as the face of the network, in a new era beginning, right? I mean, recent episode of the show I called The End of an Era, because it definitely felt like an era of Hedera was ending. And now we're starting to see signs of potentially a new era beginning. And if there's going to be a president's blog and regular live streams and spaces, then, and it says it's going to happen in weeks, that's a massive change. It might seem stupid, but it's a massive change. And I think that this document from Charles is going to be a very important one for the history of the lore of Hedera, HBAR, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, I have to agree, Mr. Best. Charles is a good CEO. Let him do his job. He's not a CEO. He's the president of Hedera. So just reminder, there is no CEO at Hedera. It's just the president. Hedera doesn't have a CEO. But yeah, I think we will be happy 6 to 12 months from now. I mean, the reality is that we got to be happy now. There are things that can be done right now to make people happy. One of those things is increasing staking. Another one of those things is more support for initiatives like WalletConnect, easier ways for builders to get grants, all these types of things. So there are things to be done now. And it's not about reinventing the wheel or doing a bunch of new stuff. It's like, look around at other networks that are thriving in ways that Hedera is not. There are things that you can do right now. And the issue is that Hedera just moves too slow. And I think Charles' article also hits at that. It's like, Hedera's slow. We need to move faster. So that's what it's about. Shady HBARbarian, hell yeah, let's get it to 150 viewers. We got 160 now. I think there's a bunch of other shows happening today. Also, I mean, this show sometimes has like 1,000 viewers. So, I mean, and here's the other thing too, why I love the video format is when I was doing this on Spaces, like Twitter Spaces, usually the show would have like 50 live listeners or something, but now that the show is video, it's so much more engaging. I can actually like engage with people more. People can call in. The viewership has grown. So, I think that, just so grateful to, be doing the show now at this level and contributors of the show. I'm not plugging the wallet for the show. The show does have a wallet that people can send HBAR to support the show. But people have sent, a good amount of HBAR, that I've sold and purchased equipment like this and all the different console and, software and stuff to do the show. So, that's being put to good use. And once I get the show back in like full fighting shape, because it's a bit of a nightmare in the back end of like getting stuff prepped and everything. Once I get everything kind of smooth and everything like that, we'll want to take it to the next level. So I'll start doing that. But if anyone wants to support the show, shoot me a DM or something. More than happy to send you the HBAR address. But especially right now, like, I'm not hurting, so I'm not going to be like soliciting HBAR from people. I think that it's pretty rough out there for a lot of people. So, but what else? I think that's everything. That's everything covered. So big takeaways today. I mean, lots of awesome ecosystem updates. There are things happening. There's stuff being built. I mean, there's still things happening with borrowing and lending. There's so much stuff coming to this network that's so exciting. And it's because the retail ecosystem and the community is coming together and growing in strength, right? When people work together and collaborate, when competitors come together and, cooperate, I think that, amazing things happen, and that has to happen. We as a community, we can't, be fighting so much. We have to come together on this stuff because there's a huge opportunity here. It does feel like a new era is starting for this network. And we're at the right place at the right time. So all that matters is kind of like staying in the game, and making it happen. And again, shout out to Shady HBARbarian, tuning in. Love that. That's what it's all about, showing up. Appreciate you so much. So really appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I love doing the show. It's one of my favorite things to do. But with that, we will continue waiting for the governing council meeting minutes. We will continue keeping an eye out for the new president's blog and Charles Spaces and stuff. We're going to keep talking about cool stories and all that good stuff. But yeah, another crazy week. So long, DBS Bank from the council. Shout out. Have a great time, I guess. Let's hope for some more council members. And yeah, I just think there's so much cool stuff happening. I think it's time to really kind of get engaged, get building, collaborate, get together. This community's powerful. So with that, hello future, goodbye past.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiast Show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.
I was also going to say a quick reminder. If you want to watch the show, the next live episode, every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, tune in. If you're on YouTube or X, all the last episodes are up there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, go listen to them, go check it out. Cheers, everybody.